At 0214 in the Strait of Hormuz, the USS Carney comes alive. A wave of RIM-174 standard extended range active interceptors launches into the night, their solid fuel boosters shaking the ship's hull as they surge toward Mach 4 within seconds. Their target: 3 Iranian Nor cruise systems racing just 10 feet above the water, less than 40 miles from a fully loaded Suezmax tanker. The timing is razor thin. If the SM-6 Seekers do not lock on within the next 11 seconds, $250 million in global energy cargo could turn into a major environmental disaster. This is not a drill. It is the sudden, carefully calculated unraveling of a $3.2 billion Iranian provocation. Tehran has just tested the Fifth Fleet, and over the next 12 minutes, its entire maritime plan in the region is about to be taken apart in real time. Tehran's $3.2 billion gamble has run straight into an integrated wall of American steel, sensors, and precision coordination. For years, the IRGC poured resources into underground launch complexes and low-profile Shahid Soleimani-class corvettes, all designed to pressure U.S. Navy escorts and raise the cost of operating in the Strait of Hormuz. Their assumption was simple: build enough anti-access and area denial pressure, and the United States would think twice before protecting the waterway. They miscalculated. The moment the IRGC moved its vessels into shadowing positions around the tanker convoy, they did more than create a provocation. They created a perfect operational map for the U.S. Navy. The American response was not a diplomatic message. It was the activation of a fully connected sensor-to-shooter network. While Iranian captains were still giving orders over unsecured radios, an AKH-11 Kennan satellite 500 miles overhead had already passed their exact thermal signatures to the tactical action officer aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. The Iranians believed they were setting the tempo. In reality, they had already been placed inside a complete targeting picture before their ships even cleared the harbor breakwater. Tehran's $3.2 billion investment depended on one idea: overwhelm American defenses through volume and pressure. But the U.S. Navy answered with something far more powerful than volume: information dominance. The instant those 3 Iranian systems left their rails, the AGM-158CLRASM was already being prepared for a countermove. That is the hard reality of modern naval operations. The U.S. did not only stop the immediate threat, it used the threat's own radar emissions to reveal the hidden Iranian positions tucked into the limestone cliffs. Tehran thought it was setting a trap. Instead, it handed the U.S. Navy a $3.2 billion reason to show why control of the Strait of Hormuz still depends on American reach, coordination, and speed. The Iranian corvettes are now operating inside a complete information blackout. They are reacting to ghost targets produced by U.S. electronic warfare, while the real RIM-174 standard extended range active interceptors are already moving toward them. The IRGC's bold challenge has turned into a public lesson in what happens when old assumptions meet a fully networked fleet. At 2:16, the Iranian corvettes attempted to lock their fire control radars onto the lead U.S. destroyer. That was the trigger. High above the water, an EA-18G Growler, one of the world's most advanced electronic warfare aircraft, swept across the sky. The pilot engaged the ALQ-218 tactical jamming receiver, and in an instant, the Iranian radar picture collapsed into confusion. Their screens did not simply go dark. They became overloaded with false signals, impossible angles, and phantom movement. The U.S. Navy was not just jamming them, it was digitally rewriting the battle space around them. Where there was one American ship, Iranian operators saw 50. They saw incoming tracks from the north, the south, and the east all at once. Every decision became slower, every command less certain, and every second shifted the advantage further away from Tehran. This is the true force of the next-generation jammer. It does not simply create noise in the air, it finds the exact frequency used by opposing hardware, locks onto it, and shuts that system out of the fight. The $3.2 billion Iranian fleet was suddenly cut off from sight, sound, and coordination, calling into empty air with no reliable response. They are trying to aim manually using the sensor feed on the USS Carney, came the report. They have lost the data link. Without their digital backbone, the Iranian launch sites along the coast became almost useless. They could no longer coordinate with the ships at sea. The U.S. had effectively removed the center of Iran's command and control network from the situation. But the IRGC, under pressure to show it still had options, released a new wave of land-based cruise systems. This was the moment the system of systems proved why it stands in a class of its own. The USS Carney did not wait for the incoming tracks to appear over the horizon. An E-2D Advanced Hawkeye circling at 30,000 feet detected the launches beyond the curve of the Earth. Using Link 16, the Hawkeye sent the targeting data directly to the vertical launch systems aboard the destroyers. The destroyers did not even need to rely on their own radars to locate the targets. They launched based on the Hawkeye's view, guided by the eyes in the sky. From the VLS cells, the RIM-174 Standard Extended Range Active Interceptors surged into the night. The SM-6 is a $4.8 million example of advanced kinetic engineering. It moves at more than 2,600 miles per hour. It does not simply travel toward a fixed point. It carries its own active radar seeker, adapted from an air-to-air system, allowing it to track fast, maneuvering threats with remarkable independence. Within 40 seconds, all 3 inbound Iranian systems were stopped 20 miles from the tanker convoy. In the darkness, there were only brief flashes on the horizon. In that instant, $3.2 billion in strategic pressure began to fade into a cloud of scattered metal and failed assumptions. But the U.S. Navy did not stop at defense. In modern naval conflict, defense alone only delays the outcome. The most decisive part of the American response came next: the counter-battery move. The Iranian corvettes, realizing their first plan had failed, tried to pull back towards shallow coastal waters. They believed those waters would protect them from larger U.S. warships with deeper drafts. They were wrong. From the internal bays of the F-35Cs, the LRASM was released. The AGM-158CLRASM is one of the world's most advanced intelligent anti-ship systems. It does not depend on GPS, which Iranian forces were already trying to disrupt. Instead, it uses an imaging infrared seeker and onboard artificial intelligence to identify the opposing vessel and compare it against a 3-dimensional library of known targets. The AGM-158CLRASM moved low and quiet, skimming just 10 feet above the waves at 600 miles per hour to stay beneath radar coverage. It did not simply close in on the Iranian vessels. It selected the most vulnerable point and arrived with extreme precision. While the surface engagement unfolded, another silent player was already in position beneath the waves. The USS Florida, an Ohio-class guided missile submarine, had been resting near the seafloor for 6 days, completely undetected. On the Admiral's command, the Florida released a coordinated flight of BGM-109 Tomahawk land attack systems. The BGM-109 Tomahawk, valued at $2 million per unit, gives the U.S. Navy the ability to reach targets far beyond the visible horizon with exceptional accuracy. These were not directed at the ships. They were aimed at the coastal launch complexes themselves. The systems traced the shape of the Iranian coastline, racing through the valleys of the Zagros Mountains at 550 miles per hour. They did not slam blindly into rock. They found the ventilation shafts, the reinforced access points, and the hardened bunker entrances that kept the underground complexes alive. Then came the chain reaction. Stored Iranian hardware inside the facilities began erupting in secondary blasts so intense that local buoys briefly issued tsunami warnings. The message was unmistakable. No tunnel was deep enough and no cliff was high enough to hide from an integrated engagement network that moves at the speed of light. By 0226, only 12 minutes after the first radar contact, the engagement was effectively over. The Iranian Shahid Soleimani-class corvette, the symbol of Tehran's $3.2 billion modernization program, was reduced to a burning wreck. 2 additional fast attack craft had been taken out of the fight by the RIM-162 ESSM. The RIM-162 ESSM is the Navy's close-range specialist, capable of pulling 50G maneuvers to intercept anything that comes within 30 miles of the carrier. For Tehran, the numbers were brutal. In 12 minutes, it had lost nearly 20% of its modern naval tonnage and 3 major coastal launch sites. The U.S. Navy, meanwhile, had used less than 0.1% of its available magazine depth. That is the cold satisfaction of efficiency. For the Iranian crews, it was a chaotic and frightening end to a mission that had collapsed around them. For the sailors aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, it was standard procedure. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tactical action officer glanced at his watch. Targets neutralized, convoy clear, resume standard patrol speed. There was no celebration, no shouting, no victory lap. He simply took a sip of lukewarm coffee and started preparing the paperwork for the mission debrief. To make sure the remaining Iranian submarines did not attempt a desperate final move, the USS Carney launched a RUM-139DLA. This system is a hybrid weapon, a rocket carrying a Mark 54 torpedo. The rocket delivers the torpedo 5 miles away in seconds. Then the torpedo descends into the water and begins an active acoustic search. The Iranian Ghadir-class submarine heard the ping of the Mark 54 entering the water nearby and immediately performed an emergency surfacing maneuver. Moments later, it appeared above the waves under a white flag. Its crew understood the reality of this system of systems. Stealth was no longer a guarantee. What made the U.S. Navy's response so overwhelming was not only the physical damage, it was the lasting psychological and electronic pressure that remained afterward. For the next 48 hours, the U.S. Fifth Fleet maintained total electronic control over the Persian Gulf. U.S. jets stayed on high alert with AGM-88 HARM systems ready. The AGM-88 HARM is designed to detect any radar source that dares to power on. The moment an Iranian operator flipped a switch to understand what was happening, the system could lock onto the signal and ride that beam at 1,500 miles per hour, disabling the antenna before it could shape the battlefield. Tehran was effectively stranded in darkness. It could not coordinate with its remaining ships. It could not track the tankers moving through the strait. It could not even organize its own internal defense picture with confidence. The $3.2 billion Tehran had spent was supposed to buy security. Instead, it bought a front-row seat to the limits of its own strategy. The U.S. Navy then brought together 3 carrier strike groups: the Lincoln, the Ford, and the Bush. Together, they formed a moving wall of steel stretching from the Gulf of Oman to the North Arabian Sea. This concentration of power is not simply about how many ships are present. It is about the information advantage they create together. When 3 carrier strike groups connect their Aegis systems, they form one shared radar picture covering more than 1.5 million square miles. Every civilian aircraft, every fishing dhow, and every unidentified drone receives its own tracking label. For the U.S. Navy, there is no confusion hidden in the noise. There is only data, filtered, processed, and turned into decisions. As impressive as the technology is, the real advantage revealed in this confrontation was the difference in training and command culture. The IRGC operates through a rigid top-down structure. A ship captain cannot act without approval from higher command in Tehran, and that chain of approval can climb all the way to the highest political offices. In a high-speed encounter where systems move at 2,000 miles per hour, that delay becomes a serious weakness. The U.S. Navy operates differently. It relies on distributed lethality, where trained officers close to the situation are trusted to act at the speed of events. The tactical action officer aboard the USS Carney, a 28-year-old lieutenant, has the authority to respond to any confirmed threat against his ship or the convoy. He does not call Washington. He does not wait for permission. He follows the engagement sequence he has practiced 10,000 times in simulators. That autonomy allows the U.S. Navy to move faster than the opposing side's OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. By the time senior IRGC leaders in Tehran were being awakened with reports of the first intercept, their fleet had already been removed from the fight. The sailors are the human processors inside this enormous machine. They are not simply operating equipment. They are managing a flow of information that would overwhelm an untrained crew. But the Aegis interface turns that complexity into clear choices: respond or hold fire, track or ignore, escalate or move on. That is the hard reality for Tehran. They are not just facing a fleet, they are facing a connected decision-making system that has already modeled every likely move and prepared a response before that move is even fully made. The U.S. Navy did not need a full-scale ground campaign. It did not need to place personnel on Iranian soil. It simply removed the assets Tehran had used to pressure global shipping. For the shipping industry, the result was immediate. Risk calculations changed, insurance pressure eased, and the Strait of Hormuz became more stable almost overnight. That stability did not come from another round of negotiations. It came from a clear demonstration of control. When the IRGC challenged the U.S. tanker escort mission, it believed it was setting a trap for a fading power. It did not understand that for the U.S. Navy, an escort mission can also become a target identification exercise. Every tanker in the convoy was protected, but every hostile sensor that reached toward it also revealed itself. Once those signals appeared in the open, they could be mapped, tracked, and, if necessary, taken offline. By 4 o'clock, the first light of morning begins to rise over the horizon, turning the Arabian Sea into a sheet of hammered gold. The tanker convoy, led by the USS Abraham Lincoln, continues its transit. The massive crude carriers look like slow-moving islands, their decks quiet, their crews safe. Behind them, the smoke rising from the Iranian coastal sites is the only visible sign that the engagement web was ever activated. To stay ahead of the curve on the technical reality of modern conflict and to see more deep dives into the sensor networks that keep the world's oceans open, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We bring you the technology, the tactics, and the truth that mainstream coverage often misses.